Welcome to Fullmetal RPG, Season 3, Episode 4. We're going to talk about the state-of-the-art OSR, which is our new series about state of our art, role-playing. And I've got two of the biggest fans of OSR I could think of. We got Gabe back. Welcome back, Gabe.
Hello.
And we got Malcolm, which, if you're in the Discord, you know him as M.Little. He is, anytime OSR comes up, there is at least 3 pages of text, and that's Malcolm. And he is a great friend and a great GM, and we've had a lot of fun. Welcome to the show, Malcolm.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I've been a fan of the show since its early days. I've been listening to Fullmetal RPG for a really long time. I think it's always been a great place to hear really thoughtful thoughts. It's cool to see Arizona so in such high regard. I love that. It's always been part of the scene. It's great in that way. So I'm really happy to be here and to share some knowledge. Well,
thank you for being here, and we're going to get. I'm sure I can just pull the string, and you guys are going to talk about OSR. So we're going. But first, we're going to kind of go on what's been going on. I mean, Gabe, we haven't seen you in a while, and
yes,
I'd like to know, what have you been up to this summer? The wettest summer in Arizona.
Yes. So I pretty much I've been super busy at work. That's slowed down. But aside from that, the thing I think would be most relatable to this is I started teaching a group how to play OSR, because they've only been in the 5e, and one of them reached out to me and she goes, "Hey, I noticed that you like OSR, me and her boyfriend, we want to try it." So they built a group together, and we had our first session last week, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. That's especially because they were like, "Why are you having us roll up 5 characters?" And I'm like, "No reason." Aside from that,
practice. It's practice.
Yeah. Aside from that,
we got the best one.
Oh yeah. They her in particular, she laughed because she basically went to reach for something without doing poke, with your 10-foot pole, and immediately learned you don't do that, because I pretty much had a bear trap and it went off, and she luckily didn't lose a hand. But from that point onward, they were crawling on Roll20, all right, I check for traps, I check for traps. And I'm like, yes.
What was the game? What was the system?
So I use Labyrinth Lord, which is a multi basic derivative. So it's BXD&D. And then the actual module we were running is Through Oltan's Door, which is a 3-part with a bonus issue zine. Very, 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 very good. The writing is spectacular. And it's definitely something you should check out if you haven't ran it before. Very whimsical and very dream. There's almost a through the looking glass vibe to it, which I really like. So, but aside from that, my collection grew 10 feet, which is now the official unit of measurement that I use. So.
Yeah, nice. So call that the buzzkill measure scale.
How many feet do you have?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much 10 feet.
Nice.
Cubic feet. Yeah.
Malcolm, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us what you've been up to?
Yeah, I live in Stockholm, Sweden. I've been into role-playing games my entire life, but I had a long bout of playing mostly video games and being interested in video game design. And then I figured that I'm not very good at programming, so what else is cool? And then I stumbled back into role-playing games. I was mostly into White Wolf and older D&D and stuff like that, but more like 2nd edition. Not so interested in the editions that were popular at the time. And I figured, okay, what else is cool? And then I began to find the blogs of the OSR. And I figured, okay, what's this all about? And people are still playing the 1st edition. Is that good? I don't remember it being good. But I was wrong, of course, because I was a kid. And now I read it. After rereading all those old books, I'm like, wow, this is stellar stuff. I understand why this birthed a freaking new medium, tabletop role playing. I mean, it's so incredibly done stuff as reading as an adult, or having a little more game design thinking hat on, and not just being a kid that wants to be a superhero and thinking that this doesn't really help me be a superhero that much. And that's probably the case because it doesn't really help you be a superhero, the first editions of D&D.
Right.
But But otherwise, I've been up to right at the moment, role-playing wise, I've been starting to play games again. I was really down during the pandemic because I had at work an OSR group. We don't call it OSR. I just say we're playing D&D. Okay, what version? The first versions, I say. Okay, let's do that. Because of D&D, it's getting so big on Twitch, on YouTube. So I was really easy to get a lot of people who've never role-played before to get on board. So I had like 10 people, 11 people playing. So, and that really works with the old versions. It's not like D&D 5 where the game falls apart if you're more than 5 people. It gets too unwieldy and the adventures are not built for that. But old school in D&D, you can have as many players as you want. And all it does, it kind of self-regulates. The more people you have, the less XP, less gold you get. So it kind of flattens out really nicely. So that worked out perfectly. It was so much fun. We were playing a mixture of mostly Swords and Wizardry, a great version of the first version of D&D based on the real original box sets before first edition. That's a great rule set, and with a little bit of old school essentials, which is basically BX D&D, which has a little more developed rules like morale rules and rules, other kind of like more updated rules for surprise and stuff like that. So I put that into my rule set. So I was having a lot of fun. But pandemic hit, no more playing at work, and I got really depressed, and I started working on my own retro clone and stuff like that. But now I've started to play online with Foundry VTT. And that's a great system to play old school Dungeons and Dragons with. So I play with my friends. We're playing the largest of all the mega dungeons called Halls of Arden Vol. It's a book on. I mean, the PDF is like over 1,000 pages. It's like 25 levels of in the dungeon. There's a whole overworld with map, and it's a great system. It's a great adventure. So I'm learning how to run that because I've never run a mega dungeon of that size, that complexity before. So that's
Foundry VTT looks pretty tight.
Yeah,
it's a great.
Did you try Roll20 first? Did you?
No.
You just went.
I did. I do what I always do. I'm gonna buy a new printer. I research that shit. I look at YouTube movies for days. And all the comparisons said Foundry, if you can program, is good enough. And so I found people who had built an old school essentials module for that system. So I took that, hacked it so it would work with Swords and Wizardry instead, because of course the pluses are different. You get for strength and all that stuff, and damage. It works a little differently. So I had to hack the code, made it work out fine. So I'm using that now, and it's great. I mean, for a mega dungeon where all the complicated maps, when you play in real life, you often, when you have a really complex dungeon, you just show it on the screen, or you draw the map for the players because it's too much of a pain in the ass. But in a VTT, you just let the players play. You turn off auto mapping and let them go wild, and they get lost, and they have to start drawing their own maps on their own on paper or on different online tools. Oh, goddamn, I thought we were going to this room, and they open the door. It's another room because they're like they've messed up, so they're like parallel up one level. It's not what they thought. They get surprised by its contents, and chaos ensues.
Giant catacombs at that point.
I love that. It's so much fun.
That's I think what I love about OSR, like, and what just like drew me to it is just it's so. I always joke about it, like when people like first play OSR with me. Because I'm a very hands-off DM, and they'll be like, all right, cool. So like, why are we in this dungeon? I'm like, I don't know, man. You heard there's treasure here. Okay, well, like, why are we getting it? I don't know, man. Just go like kick some doors. Like that's like all you need. Like it is the bare bones of D&D, which is kicking down doors, getting treasure, and like the one thing I always like seeing people's eyes light up with is they're like, wait, so we level up by just getting loot? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like,
yeah.
Oh, damn. That's amazing.
You can build your world as you want. What I like to do is we can begin the discussion there. But what I love to do with the creating the world is just saying that you guys are dirt poor. You have no chances. You can stay at home, get a wife, become a serf. Indentured work is what you can get, or you can fuck off to the Badlands and get all the stuff you want. And that's what I just tell the players, that you come from really simple backgrounds.
Oh yeah.
And what you got, the starting gold is basically them just having you got a bunch of sheep and cows and leather and with you, and that's basically your starting capital. You trade it in for adventuring gear, and then you go out. And then that's what they start with. And then, of course, they recruit people in the town, and they might have their own backstories, and that might grow up and turn into something else. But I just say, you guys are coming from really dire straits. And the reason why you're doing this is basically, you're not like normal people. You don't want a wife and kids. You want something else. And here you can get something else. And then they start learning magic, worshiping elder gods. And stuff like that, and then they build it up, and they understand that their characters at least are crazy people going down into hell, back again and again and again. So they understand off the bat that their characters are weird, and they start role playing them as kind of eccentric and strange and violent, and like they get into that kind of Western movie mindset of like they're there for all the wrong reasons, and they just go wild. And while they're there, they'll find people they fall in love with. They'll find NPCs that they'll care a hell of a lot about, more than they do for themselves. And they'll do anything for those people. So it goes from being, total egoists to into becoming like truly selfless people at the flip of a dime, which makes them look totally erratic and scary. So everyone every 0 level character, they see those characters.
Stay away from those dudes.
Yeah. So much violence. So much. Yeah.
Yeah. So see what I mean about, I get 3 pages for one sentence. This is gold right here.
Okay.
So I've been we still playing Brendan's Ravenloft game. That's what I've been up to, and we went into a hole in the back of this toy shop where this like corrupted toy man had been like layered, and I thought that because I'm playing the rogue and we have a couple of inexperienced players, and I thought the trap was a sound-based trap. So we went in this room, and there's like a like skeletal zombie like at an organ with all these other skeletal zombies like hanging off of strings from these like this mechanical like almost like a puppets like from the ceiling. And I thought, oh, this is a sound-based trap, so if we just be really quiet, we can kind of get through this. No. Pressure plate. Pressure plate us, and basically this is the second fight we've had in this game, and one character died. This is 5e D&D. One character died, and then the other 2 characters were on the ground. I was able to drag them out. So like it has been really, and these were just like kind of skeleton level bad guys, and we're like level 3 of us are level 2, one of us is level 1, and then one of the other characters was kind of off doing his own side adventure. So yeah, but it really wouldn't have mattered like if he is there, because he would have run like immediately. So like he was like yelling at us at the table like, you guys should run. I'm like, no, we have a chance here of beating these guys. It's just the fact that Brendan was hot rolling and like just critted twice and just never missed and was rolling high damage, and like I could have probably kited the rest of this room with my rogue, just like shooting them with arrows. But of course that would have been really boring for everybody else. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to drag these people out of this dungeon and
Cut
just
your
like
loss.
you cut our losses and apologize to the character that we couldn't save because they were already dead. But
from there too.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we're just trying to figure out what to do next because it's supposed to be close to the end of the story arc, but we really haven't even won a fight yet. So like it was it's just one of those times when I'm like, yeah, they say 5e is not like that deadly, but if you roll like shit and have shit stats, it's fucking deadly. Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, all those crits and advantage, I mean, that goes both ways. I mean, that's why they have all those really forgiving systems. Because I mean, all that can't really be done in the old school D&D. Because of course, there's a range of damage, and they can be disastrous. That getting hit that way too. But just like all those kind of crit on and all these kind of snowballing effects are much smaller and much more manageable in the old school. So I understand the 5e can be monstrous if you're unlucky enough.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. Is like we rolled 3d6 down the line for stats, which
old school style.
Yeah, great.
And there's a reason that you don't do that. That's like not even a recommended method in the book anymore. Like,
no, exactly. You get too low stats that way.
Yeah, and like the wizard had a -2 con modifier. So
nice, great. This is sounding great.
Yeah, this is sounding good.
Brandon is running it exactly as I would.
Yeah,
definitely.
It is exact, but it's like he's trying to get this story going in this like creepy city, but it's just like every time we kind of interface with something that's because like we had this scene in the previous session where like the bad guy kind of showed up to this performance. Like we were trying to talk there's a toy man who's trying to move into town, and we had somehow like kind of intersected with them, and the old gnarled corrupted toy man showed up to like destroy his performance in front of all these people. And like I think Brendan was expecting us to like actually fight this guy, but as soon as he shows up, he like flips a wagon, and we're like, no, we're running
later.
Like this is a run. This is not a like we're not gonna win this fight. So it's a creepy city. It's an amazing atmospheric. Like imagine playing 8 or 9 sessions of Dungeons and Dragons and having 2 fights where most of the party dies.
Yeah, that sounds like that sounds like a great time to me.
Sounds like a great time. I love that.
It has been a great time. It's just one of those things where it's like trying to show new people like how to play the game, and they're like, so the warlock was like, oh, I'm gonna hit it with my sword. It's like, no, hit it with your spell, even if you're in hand to hand, because your cantrips in D&D it doesn't provoke anymore. It's like it's. So, but they weren't. Go ahead.
I was gonna say what's funny about that, like cantrips, is I had something come up with the new group that I'm running, and one of the girl that actually wanted to start the group, she's playing a magic user, and she's like, all right, cool. So I have my spells. Like where's like my cantrips? Like what are the spells I can use? And I'm like, those don't exist. And she's like, well, what do I use? And I'm like, you get to use the old sling and rock. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, your spells are like, that's your big damage. Like you do not want to use those on just like a simple skeleton. So you're just going to be sitting there chucking rocks the whole time with your sling. And it's like seeing people like really reel back and go like, oh, wow. Like kind of like what you're saying, like having -2 con and all that. One of them rolled up literally 1 HP and they're terrified. And I'm like, that's good. Like that is old school because and it's not that I dislike 5e. I love 5e like a lot. It's my second favorite iteration of it, with the first being Mold-A Basic, which again, that's OSE and Labyrinth Lord. But like when you take those old school systems and the dungeon becomes half of the enemy, I think that's what's different. 5e has such a great scope of like monsters and encounters and stuff you can come across, but in those old school systems, like the dungeon is like the main antagonist, and I think that's like some of the charm that to me is appealing, and to like see some of that brought into 5e, kind of like that old school flavor with like rolling 3d6 down the line. like you can turn 5e, like you were saying, like everything you're talking about with like the toy maker. I'm like, I want to play this. Like this sounds like old school style 5e, and like that's what I really like.
I think you guys really dig it. Breakfast Champions is like, how many spell slots do I have? It's like, no, it's not how that works at all.
No, exactly.
Yeah, that was kind of what I've been up to recently. So
sounds like a good time, man.
It has been a great time, and we've been playing in person, and it's sort of like really nice to see people again. It's always one of those things where it's like, oh, is this how we do things? So we've been doing meals beforehand. Like it's one of those things where it's like it's almost the fellowship before the variable start of when the game starts, kind of thing.
Yep.
And I have missed that, but I also enjoy my online adventures. Like we had that Mork board game where I had my character had 2 hit points. My character had 2 hit points and survived. I want to
do one of those again so bad. Those community games are so fun.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. I'm speaking. We'll roll right into a Patreon conversation because that seems appropriate. If you got excited about that Mork board game, I mean, we can do that again. We just didn't have the support kind of dipped afterwards, and people were not as responsive after a while. Like they were, everybody kind of got busy. But so kind of maybe have to go with a community game that'd be a little more smaller in scope before it could expand to a giant thing, right? And some people to be dedicated to the back end part of it would be also. So we should have that as a new goal on the Patreon. I'm trying to set, if we get back to 200, I'm definitely bringing Buzzkill's bookshelf back. I have 25 foot of bookshelves in the Buzzkill
there it is again.
Scale. I would like to share more of those. I have some really cool, interesting things like this game from Brazil that's like this weird disc-shaped book that no one has probably seen since Gen Con 2015 when I bought it from the one guy that demoed it. There's a lot of cool stuff on my shelf. I'd like to share it, but I need some encouragement from the patrons, and new patrons are encouraging to me. They're giving us lifeblood. We would not look as good as we look now. We would not be doing as many things as we do now without the Patreon. Really appreciate all of the support. It's really keeping us going for sure. And we would probably be having this conversation over text somewhere today instead of doing this live stream or podcast. So, cause that's where we're at, but, thanks all the patrons for all you do for us. And I promise we will finish updating the Patreon eventually. It's a lot to do.
I just want to say that I'm a proud patron of the podcast. I love what you guys have been doing, and I hope other people join us on Discord. Because when you're there, you can hang out with the other patrons and all the other listeners, and it's a great community. A lot of discussions there, and it becomes a lot easier to motivate yourself to become a patron when you hang out with cool people. So
patron games are really fun. That's how I met Malcolm and Kirby and Wolf, and it was a fantastic time.
Yeah, the Discord is really our home. Like it's really the home of the show now. Like I'm trying to reinvigorate the Facebook, and if you think here, let me plug the Instagram real quick because it's almost like we started again on Instagram. I don't know why. We lost we didn't lose anybody. Brendan is now Industrial Strength RPG. He took the old Full Metal RPG Instagram. So if you think you're following us on Instagram, you're following Brendan. So please come to Full Metal RPG on Instagram, and I'm trying to get some more going on there. But it's so much more dynamic and fun on the Discord than it is on any social platform I can think of. Like no social platform matches Discord. tinyurl.com/fullmetaldiscord if you're just listening to this, or you follow our link tree. Anyway, so now that we've talked half an hour about OSR, we're going to talk another half hour about the state of OSR and get into it. The first thing I want to ask you guys is, what is your preferred meaning for the acronym OSR? I want to hear your thought on what is because we talk a lot about stuff and we use a lot of acronyms on these shows, and OSR is one of those acronyms that sort of gets repurposed in different ways. So I want to hear, Gabe, what is your preferred version of the acronym OSR?
Old school Renaissance.
Old school Renaissance. Okay.
Old school Renaissance, because I believe that some of the roots of it date back to like mid 2000s is like when it really started to move. You had Goblinoid Games and stuff putting out, well, I mean, technically if you want to go to like the super beginning, you have what's it called? Oh my God, I can't think of it.
Castles and Crusades?
No, Castles and Crusades is one of them. But anyway, I'll get back to that. You also had Goblinoid Games and stuff creating Labyrinth Lord. Osric. That's what I was trying to think of. You had Osric. Osric is one of the first ones. And it was pretty much a renaissance of looking at these old rules, which you could, modify and retro clone using the OGL. And people started to kind of create different takes and clarifications and stuff. Because, I mean, if you look at some of those early editions, some of the rules aren't like super clear. And it's either because it was kind of up to the DM or maybe just left for interpretation to begin with. So some of these retro clones and stuff are coming out and going, well, what if we had Holmes Blue Set, but we like modified this certain aspect of it, kind of like our house rules. So you had these different flavors kind of branching off. So that's why I kind of say it's more or less a renaissance and like an appreciation of it than it is a revival of people just going, hey, this is kind of cool again, let's just do it. To me, renaissance implies that it is coming back, and it's not really going to go anywhere, at least for like the foreseeable future. So Malcolm,
do you agree with Gabe there, or
definitely. It's a renaissance. It's the old school renaissance. It's also not only a play style, it's a scene. And you could say a scene is what a scene does, but that is maybe too vague. But it is something. It's a kind of a movement. It's both creative and also trying to engage with the players in a new way. For example, I played role-playing games my entire life, but I never played it in the so-called old school way. I played with a lot of skills, a lot of character depth. That was what I thought role-playing was like inhabiting a character, something I did terribly. I'm a terrible actor. I always get tongue-tied. I create basically the same person every game, no matter what game I play. I was terrible at it. But that's the Swedish way of playing. It was very, very character-driven, and all the skills and all the rules, all the edge cases that had to be mapped out. And then I found the old school Renaissance where they were playing with rules light, and they were totally doing new stuff and all the random generation and stuff. So that was what got me into it. So I figured this is something new. So I was not in it as any nostalgia, because I never played it that way. It was totally new for me, and all my friends the same way. None, especially in Sweden, D&D was never really. There's always been D&D here, but it was not the big systems. It was more BRP, basic role-playing games, or it was White Wolf. So there was some grognards, of course, who have been playing it basic since back then, but there was nothing I ever experienced. So for me, the OSR was totally new play style, new way of looking at how to create characters, how to create adventures, how to use the system to create gonzo, really strange, very weird experiences, something that I was like totally enthralled with. So for me, it is a renaissance. It's a scene, it's a play style, it's people, it's creators, it's gamers.
It's an art form.
Yeah, exactly. All that at once. When me being really into music, I really vibe off that. I feel like that's really all the things I want: community, creativeness, and and a way to like reach out to people. And everyone can be creative. Everyone can create a blog. Everyone can put up their little dungeon on itch.io. It's so easy to collaborate and become a part of the scene. All you have to do is say, I created a little adventure, and people will give you thumbs up and say, that's really cool. Maybe I'll use that in my campaign. And then you drop that little castle into your campaign, and all of a sudden someone's using your stuff. And that's what's so incredible about it. That's what I love about it too. But that's why.
Yeah, I agree. It's old school Renaissance. And I think retro clone is the exact right word for a lot of the early stuff. I think it's moved on and it kind of swings back and forth. But what we mean by that is generally there were many versions of Dungeons and Dragons in the 70s. And a lot of the retro clones are taking those different little incremental changes and deciding, I want to rewrite those rules. So you say BXD&D, which I believe is the basic box set, right?
Basic expert, yeah.
Basic, and then
2 box set.
Right, and then there's Moldvay, which is another version of it after that, right? So there's literally a lineage of all these games, like first edition, all these, like, oh, we're going to do it without elves and dwarves. Like, we're literally like going back to before they were even classes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a lot of what we're talking about, is these kind of reinterpretations of those systems. And then we branch out into stuff like Morkborg, which is like really gonzo and out there, but also still has those seeds of the random generation and some of the very hard edges that you encounter when you're going through those worlds. So but I just want to expand that, because I think it's one of those things where like people just think it's like, oh, these guys just love these old black and white games, and like, they don't want their games in color, and I want it to look like typewritten, and like there's an aesthetic, and but it's now become a very wide genre. It was a scene, but now I feel like it's a genre unto itself. It's not just fantasy games, but also OSR is kind of its own genre of fantasy, but it's different from what we call traditional trad games, and that you'll hear that a lot as we go on.
Exactly. There's a lot of ways to explain it. Of course, the cool thing about all the old different versions of the old D&D, the old school versions, is that they're all basically just small increment differences. So you can take, I want to play a version of basic, but with this from AD&D first edition, or that. So you can just pick and choose. That's what the great thing. You can take any D&D adventure and play with any of those rule sets, and they'll work.
Yep.
And that's what makes it so magical, is that the scene and the amount of possible books you can use is incredible.
And like if you're like and I don't mean this in a negative way, if like you're a tabletop gamer that's like on a really strict budget, you can go onto eBay or go to, like, here in Arizona, we have Zia, which is a record store and bookstore. It's like kind of an everything store, or just like go online and you can find old BX modules, or even just like first edition modules, for either free. Like, I have a bookmark that's like 300 plus, just like community made on Dragon's Foot adventures, all compatible with OSR. And you can run those for your friends. And you will never run out of content, and you won't have to drop a dime. And like, kind of going off what Malcolm said, with everything just kind of working together. I run a Scarlet Heroes game with my girlfriend, which is OSR. It's written by Kevin Crawford, who also did Stars Without Number, then Worlds Without Number. And that is specifically made for one person, one DM. And that is rooted in, I believe it's Moldvay as well. But it's got some manipulations to it so that you can make it one person one, but the stats and everything transfer over. And then I have a game with one of my really closest friends, and that's Labyrinth Lord. And I wanted to bring them together just to see if I could make it work. And I had a player running Scarlet Heroes, a player running Labyrinth Lord, using a module from Basic Fantasy RPG, which is essentially another Moldvay derivative, but with ascending AC. And it all worked completely. And like, that right there is like the beauty of OSR, in that you can have all these different games, these different modules and everything, and you will truly never run out of like stuff to do. And like that is so cool to me. It is so cool.
That's the thing, because of course I love Mörkborg. They're made by my compatriots here in Sweden. I'm super proud of all of their accomplishments. I love the game, but the cool thing about the D&D derivatives is that they're so compatible with each other. That's what makes it so magical. You can take something from Lamentations. I'll take something from the Judges Guild. I'll take something from even second edition D&D. I could take something there because it's very similar in ways to the old versions. I could just put it together, a little Planescape here, a little that, and it'll work. And that's what's so cool about it. But of course, the other games like Mörkborg or Troika, which is or Mothership, who's totally different rules, and they're great in their own way, and I love them too. But they're very more insular. It's that experience you'll get, and you cannot take a barrel maze. I can't take it. I can't take that dungeon and easily just slot it into Troika, sadly, because the rules are not compatible enough. But as long as you're in the old school D&D vibe, it's like incredible how seamless they all work together. So you can just and because D&D is basically just plane hopping different realities too, you can just easily, I'm in Carcosa 1 week, and then I'm in Ravenloft the next, and then I'm back on the Greyhawk world later. Or the known world from the basic books.
Compatibility is such a pillar.
Compatibility is like I think that's why the OSR is big as it is. I mean, all cred to the play style and the maxims but it's the backwards compatibility with all those systems, which D&D lost with third edition. And definitely, I love D&D because it's so different from later editions. That's a great mark of great design, but the old stuff is so compatible. It means you have games for days and days and days, never end.
You can tailor it to down to the specific player. Because last summer I did a full 10-floor clear of the Stonehell dungeon, and some of my players were like, I want to play Moldve, specifically, which is what original Labyrinth Lord is based on. But then I had a player that's like, I want a multi-class, and I want to play a druid and cleric, which is something from advanced D&D. So using Labyrinth Lord, it was one of the first systems to create that compatibility with the advanced edition companion. So I had race class BX D&D players playing alongside advanced characters, which you couldn't do beforehand. But Labyrinth Lord has created a system in which they are compatible. So to have a dwarf, a fighting man, and then a human druid playing alongside in a system neutral dungeon, for someone like me, and I'm pretty sure Malcolm is like this too, seeing that, it's so cool. It's so cool to see all of that just working seamlessly.
No, it's great that way. It's so fun. So there's a lot of different systems out there. There's a lot of different ways to play it. I think theoretically you can create a game that is basically you being in a cooking championship, and you can just build that game, a slice of life kind of game. Maybe you're not even the head cook. You're just in this kitchen. The head cook is their referees handling, and everything's just player skill. Everyone has to be a foodie or have some kind of knowledge in the kitchen, but everything else, what are you guys going to make? And then you can just create systems for how the judges would react and how the other teams are trying to fuck you over and stuff like that. And you can create a game, and that would be OSR, because it would tick off all the maxim boxes: player skill, rulings not rules, sandbox play. All that, you can do that. It's possible. I would love to actually, just speaking about, I think that would be kind of really cool to do that. But I think all that is possible. It's just that the dungeon in the old school gaming is such a controlled environment that can go so crazy, and it's so much fun stuff there. So that's basically why it's old school. But I think you could take anything about the OSR and place it into entirely different worlds and different rule sets if you want, as long as you try to fix up, you just try to adhere to the maxims, which is basically I think I know people say that the OSR, what does it mean? It means anything to anyone. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And I don't think that's true. I think it's a category for certain players to know, okay, this game is my play style. If they're saying they're inspired by the OSR, I understand what that means.
Yep.
I know what they're making. It's not just gobbledygook. Just like it could be anything, and who knows what it means, and it just means whatever I want it to mean. And I don't think that's really fair, because I think there are quite defined. Of course, it's very fluid, and even AD&D First Edition, which is count the OSR. If you play rules as written, it's a very complex game. It's not rules light at all, but it's called OSR because the rule sets are so all the subsystems are so interchangeable. You can take anything out and this game won't break. So you can hack AD&D 1, which everyone's done. Every 10-year-old, no 10-year-old knew how to play the first edition to AD&D because it's too complex. They took what they want, they played it, and it worked. And that's what's so cool about it. I like AD&D first edition, but I want the encumbrance system from Lamentations, which is much simpler. It's a slot-based. Just take that out, put that in, nothing breaks down. And the same thing with I want to change the XP system. That you probably should keep the requirements to go up a level, but I don't want it to be gold for XP. I want to have exploration, or I want it to be political. I have to take over towns, and that's how I get XP. You can do that too, and it'll work basically. So that's what's so cool about it.
It's all system neutral.
Yeah, so all that can work, but I think that OSR does actually mean something.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about like how much people, because the one thing that from those old games that I think gets changed immediately is THAC0, right? Because it's not as it works really well if you can get over the hump of this kind of reverse thought, because most of the ones I've interfaced with have kind of switched over. That's the one thing they've kind of switched over to the positive AC system.
But I understand that. I'm really stupid. I don't know how THAC0 works. So all I do is I give everyone the table. Look at that table. Look at your level versus the guy's AC, and then you just find on the matrix on the table what you have to hit. So that's all I give the players, and they understand it. I play only descending, so no. They some of them, the more mathy players, they'll understand THAC0 and start doing it that way. But no, I just give everyone a photocopied little. They have it on their sheet. They look at it, or they write it down. There's on modern character sheets. They usually have your levels to hit ratio.
Yeah,
so you just write
I was
it down
going to
there.
say the Labyrinth Lord sheet on the bottom will actually have a single THAC0 thing. So like all you need to know is like, okay, what's their AC? Oh, it's 4. All right, I need to roll a like 15 or a 13 or whichever. And so like I'm just like ignore like all of this, just pay attention to this.
Yeah.
Here's your roll. Add these and these together, and then this is their AC. Did you meet or exceed it? Cool, you're good.
Exactly.
Because
I would play like that.
I would make that number when I was playing second edition back in the 90s. I would make that number. I would just figure it out and just write it down once, and then when I redo my THAC0, I just move the numbers one over.
That was a life hack that TSR learned that they can do it. But I think that I know ascending is easy, just plus whatever you have, and then you'll hit it. But I mean, it's even easier to give someone that table. Here, look at that table, just roll. I've done it for so many players. They have no idea how the math works. It's like, I just compare this, and okay, now I know what to hit. I hit it.
And
so
there's
that's easier to learn, I think.
People have even like hacked THAC0, and like I've seen systems like there's one called Target 20, which is like the sum of like this, and this. If it meets or exceeds 20, then it's a hit. And that's I think even easier, because then you have to just focus on one number. I haven't personally used that, but I think it's also because I actually enjoy the mechanical, equation kind of aspect of THAC0. Yeah, I don't know why. I really do enjoy that. I enjoy looking at the table, kind of doing doing one of these, or comparing. Okay, a 3 HD creature has this and whatnot. I enjoy that aspect, but I can also see why there's systems where people would enjoy ascending AC, like Basic Fantasy, which is literally OSR with ascending.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And all the old
I was gonna say my joke was gonna be I was gonna write Thaco the role playing game, and,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
just to see how many people, how much hate mail I would get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Thaco thing I think is a little math nerdy. I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. So I can never figure it out exactly how you do it. I just look at the table. But all the modern versions like Swords and Wizardry, Old School Essentials, they also include the ascending table too. So you can just follow that just as easily and just still play it. So I understand some players go, I'll never go back to descending. That sounds crazy. But when I play with new players, it's not hard to get them to play because they have nothing to compare it with.
Right.
They've never played 5e or 4e or anything like that. They just look at this table. I mean, it's a little archaic, but they think it's fun.
Okay. I really like that of OSE. I was looking at that because I just got Halls of the Blood King in the mail, and I noticed that they had the ascending alongside the Thaco. So I'm still waiting to get a book because as soon as they go up, they're sold out. I'm like, well, eventually.
It's super popular now. I mean, the books are so beautiful. I mean, this is not the non-advanced version, so this is the basic one. But it's the layout is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
So easy to read. I mean, you find out what old school role playing is about by reading this book. Oh, all the mechanics with the surprise rules and the encumbrance. When you can just the encumbrance rules are often too difficult to actually play with. So, but they're there. But that's the great thing about Foundry when I play it online is that all that is digitized. So I just turn it on, and all of a sudden,
don't worry about it.
and it became so engaging. The people are dropping things like crazy. Oh, I have this. I'm carrying around 2 jugs of oil. It's too heavy. I'm chucking it and taking that little statuette with me instead. So they're throwing things off them all the time. So it becomes really fun because otherwise it would be a pain. I mean, writing it down, all that kind of stuff. I think that you have to use the rule of cool or the rule of stupid. Okay, you're carrying 75 javelins. That's stupid. Don't do that. And then otherwise it's fine.
I'm gonna take these 50 gold bars and put them into my bag.
You go whoop. Exactly. Yeah. And I always randomize magic items and spells. So what people say in 5e is that a bunch of dump spells. What's the point of this? In the old versions, you only got the spells that you found in the dungeon. So a spell they didn't have to be balanced because you got them randomly. Oh, this rope trick where I can just climb up and just disappear into a little portal into this little pocket dimension. That sounds stupid. Oh, but if it's the only 3rd level spell you found and you have it in your magic book, you'll find uses for it when you have it. Of course, when you have everything available, that's a different thing. But that's elite gamer. You have to be playing for years and years and years to get all those spells. Magic users find things all the time, and they die. Their spell books get ruined. When people die, I always make sure all their items get rolled for saving throws. And people lose stuff all the time in my game. Oh no! How much does it cost to replace my magic book? Because the empty spell book is only like 50 gold pieces. But if you have to replace it, it's going to cost thousands of gold pieces.
Oh yeah, especially with all that shit they have stored in there.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to get all that back from memory, it's going to cost you a lot.
Yeah. Oh, so old school. So what is kind of the current kind of you guys kind of talk a little bit about hotness of some of these titles, but is like old school essentials advanced is kind of like that's the thing that just kind of dropped that they had their Kickstarter and they just sent that out. But what else is kind of big and new, or you just the kind of like staples? I throw some of these things around. Like, go ahead, Gabe.
Say OSR it's so, and Malcolm kind of touched on this like earlier. The OSR has gone from being let's recreate some of those earliest editions of D&D. So you have options like, I mean, the slogan of like Swords and Wizardry is before 1st edition, which is basically emulating OD&D, which is like the white box. So like you can pick a game like that if you really want to get like, I always joke with my friends. It's like, if you want to get that neckbeardy and get like, we're playing like OD&D, you can have options like that, or you can have a game that's like emulating, I always say it, Moldvay Basic, or you can have like, there's Blueholm, which is Holmes Basic, which is like the original blue box. So you have all those flavors, but then at the same time, you also can pick games that are OSR inspired, where it's like the stakes are still really high, but it's not compatible with all those old D&D. So like you have Stars Without Number, which is an OSR space exploration game, which my girlfriend ran and I've played. And it's one of my longest campaigns I've ever been a part of. You have that. But then you also have games that are like even further deviated from that, where like Malcolm mentioned Mothership. So you have all these different flavors, but I'd say like if you're looking for just your standard dungeon crawl, you got Labyrinth Lord, you have Osric, you even have OSE. But I would definitely say like if you're listening to this now and you're like, I want to get into OSR, this sounds like fun. I would personally say check out OSE, because OSE is like it is revolutionizing layout. It's revolutionizing compatibility with things, where like say you have a player that's not yet comfy with ACO, it's got the ascending AC there, and it has some of the best creative minds writing adventures for that. That you don't even like necessarily need to run them in OSE, because I'm currently running one that's in Labyrinth Lord. But I would also say too, like if you're the kind of person that's just into art, period, check out a website like Exalted Funeral and just start scrolling through zines. All of that stuff is all OSR stuff, and it's all neat one-offs you can pick up. So like the actual scape of what's out there is just gigantic. And I think we're going to eventually hit a point too where people start OSR-ing like 3rd edition. We haven't quite yet reached
it's
that.
20 years old almost.
Yeah, it's good. It's getting there. So.
Yeah, exactly. There are the editions. I mean, people play 4th edition, but with a real. They've dialed up the threat a lot. Yeah. So they play that kind of tactical fighting, but it's super dangerous. And they incorporate a lot of old school mentality and how the adventures are made and how the rules should be thought. So they rewrite the rules. That total disrespect for the rules as written is what the OSR is all about. Hack it to make it work. Exactly what you want. But yeah, I would say the old school essentials, of course, is what the hotness right now.
Yeah,
it's really beautifully done. It's great. What other games that are cool at the moment is probably Mouse Ritter, which is a basically kind of mouse guard type game. This is based on Into the Odd system, which is another OSR rule set. It's very rules light. It's kind of a mixture of British old school role playing games like Warhammer Woofrup, but Woofrup is like skill heavy. Into the Odd, it's like more OSR. So they kind of mix D&D and basic and old British role-playing games, and it made some kind of amalgamation. But Mouse Ritter is really cool. There's a new box set coming. It's a beautiful game. There's a lot of fan content being created right now. Right now, there's a Kickstarter for a book made by the fans. Also, it's really cool. It's I always loved the Mouse Guard, but I always thought the role-playing game by Luke Crane was way too complex for my tastes. I love the stories it generates, but I thought I would like it a little simpler. And this is really simple game system. So yeah, that's one version.
The Burning Wheel system, as much as I love it, and I love the verbal combat because it has basically the same complexity for verbal and actual combat, but it's a lot. It's a lot. I only really ever want to play it as a one shot. I played
Burning Wheel. That's a gamer's game.
I play that at Gen Con. When I go to Gen Con, hopefully everyone that's hearing me is safe and back and clean from Gen Con. Stay safe, homies. But it's that game. I love it, but I think we had with somebody running for me, but it's intense. Like it's super intense and it's a lot, and it's taking a lot of trad, and it's like everything gets thrown in there. It's like this kitchen sink, but it's not these other games. That sounds like a way you could get people, like, especially like you're playing mice, right? That's essentially what that mouse versus cats, right? So it's really easy for everybody from a little kid to people that have not played anything to kind of get into that mindset. of that, rather than being like medieval peasants, right?
And what's really cool too, now that you mention it,
beautiful.
is when you mentioned like kids getting into OSR, and that's something that people are putting content out. There's not a lot of it, to my knowledge, but I know Dan from Labyrinth Lord, he released Lordling, which is a kid-friendly OSR game. And by kid-friendly, I mean, like, a lot of times when you run OSR, you know, you'll talk about like, oh yeah, you see this guy and his whole like head just gets crushed in because you brain him or whatever. And like the book will tell you, you know, add in as much of this as you want. My buddy, he ran it for his 7-year-old who's just like obsessed with horror movies like he is. So he was able to kind of like, you know, there's these skeletons and their like faces rotting off and stuff. But she had an absolute blast. So you can, you know, we're hitting the point where it, like people are coming up with introductory games into like, here's, you know, check it out. And that was the other thing I was going to mention too, is if you don't want to like hop in like head first into OSR, there's OSR Light Games like Morkborg, which have aspects of OSR, the deadliness, the randomness. Like, I mean, they even have like Scumbirther, which is like the character generator. So it's like, well, I died, click, here's my new character. Which kind of have like the essence of OSR in it. So you can try out OSR if you like, give it a shot. That way you don't have to like read an entire PHB or, you know, what have you. Especially because Morkborg prides itself on like, you can learn to play this game in 15 minutes. So
yeah, for sure.
Definitely, you know, you have that whole big spectrum from kids, super neckbeards, like, you know, Burning Wheel, which I absolutely love.
I have to shave twice a day to keep my neck beard down.
Yeah, exactly. The true beauty of Burning Wheel is that it contains 0 parasitic gameplay, which parasitic gameplay is basically, if you remove it, does the game fall apart? So system on systems are some of the things that people would argue is, you know, there's an issue with modern tabletop games. You know, you don't need that. If you pull it out, does the game collapse? No? Cool. You can remove it. Burning Wheel contains none of that. If you pull any of those systems out, the game collapses. So like the fact that they were able to design it that perfect is just, it's a feat alone. So
yeah. No, it generates really cool stuff. I just love when I play games. I like the old school way to say, I mean, this is not only for D&D, but the old school way of saying it, like everything else you just role play it. Just role play it. Just say what you want. Try to convince your referee that that's cool enough, and then do it. Yeah. But I do love systems that create outcomes. That's what also I like about the modern OSR is that they create so many random tables. I mean, many of my games, it's basically the entire sitting is just one random event. I didn't even know that was going to happen. Like last time my players played, they were going to check out a tower in this Ardenval, this mega dungeon up above ground. Check out a tower. I rolled a random table. I have to roll it like I think 3 times an hour. No, this was 3 times an hour. Yeah. So I rolled it. I rolled a 1. Okay, what's coming up? A wyvern's going to fall. Come here. Works for a wyvern who works for who's been cowed by the local green dragon. They have a green dragon in this level. You're supposed to meet him at level 1 because he'll search for the players as soon as they get loot and start, you know, like saying, I need a little money. Give me some of your. I want a percentage
taste
of your
it.
work.
So mobster dragon essentially.
Mobster dragon. So his wyverns fly down.
His protection fee.
Or I will eat you.
Yeah, and wyverns I always play that they're like basically just giant lizards, not very intelligent. So they flies down, looks at their flies down. They see it, but they ignore it. No, we want to check this thing out. Okay, I roll reaction. Interested. Okay, you pique this interest. It flies down. They run away into the forest. It's not really aggressive because I didn't roll any aggressiveness. It's just wants to check it out. So they leave their stagecoach on the square. That gets rummaged through by the wyvern. So they start eating their food and not tearing apart, but you know, shoving its entire head into the stagecoach. And they're running around trying to get past it. And I keep on rolling random encounters, and they keep on hitting. So there's like giant rats. You hear apes in the further in the forest.
Damn.
So all this content was just random encounters, and we didn't have time for anything else. They had to go home and then come back the next session to see what happened to their stagecoach. Thankfully, they had all their stuff on them, and the stagecoach was basically just food and rope. So they left it there and came back, and that was the entire session. Was just basically that. So, and then I love that.
I think it's to add on to that real quick. I think a modern 5e player, if they're really wanting to get like honed in on DMing and really test themselves as a DM, I think it's important to try out older systems, because the older systems are not super forgiving with DMing. Like, you really have to think on your toes like that. Like, you have to constantly be doing morale checks. You have to constantly be monitoring each and every single monster, and like, how are the players going to react? Because on older systems, you have group initiative. The players can pick whatever order they want, and if they just want a full hard stack up front, like, that DM reaction is kind of important to make sure they're still having fun. So, listening to a story like that, I think to me is an important aspect, that if you do want to take DMing seriously, try out some older systems and see how much it beats you up. It's kind of like, going to the gym, getting beaten up a little bit, coming back, learning.
Yeah, there's a lot of improv because there's so much random generation. So I think that helps me as a DM, because I'm having to script an entire story and follow it. That's difficult enough. But I'm getting content for free. Oh, yeah, this showed up, and the Green Dragon's Wyvern showed up. Okay, they have to deal with that, and then they all of a sudden they know that there are. And I play with new players, so they don't know D&D's. Monster manual inside and out. They have no idea. Oh, a lizard kind of looks like a giant bat. It's like the dragon, and like a Smog. He's like, he's moving like a giant bat. He only has 2 legs and his wings. He's moving around, and they think, oh, that's so weird. And I figured, okay, this is like boilerplate stuff, but they never interacted with it before, so they thought it was lots of fun.
Everything is fascinating that early on.
Yeah, and I think some of it is. And especially if you bring new or 5e or some other, or is like, you have to, as a game master, you have to pretend that this is dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people in 5e and a lot of other the ventures, when you meet something, you're supposed to be able to beat it, right? That's this sort of modern, but that's not part of the OSR mentality. Is whatever happens happening, and if you meet something, you may or may not be able to do anything about it, at all. Like, or you might be able to like punch really far up. If you come up with a clever plan, you can punch really far up. So it's like, there's 2 sides to that, but it's something that I think people need to know up front. It should be part of that session 0, part of that beginning conversation. That like, look, this is dangerous to your characters. Like,
I was going to say, the most recent group that I started, they're all, green 5e players, which is totally fine. I don't really see one person's favorite, edition different than, mine or whichever, but, it's very different. So when we did do our session 0, I had them make their first character that they're playing, completely traditional 3d6. Here's how we're going to add this. Here's your THAC0, like all of that using Labyrinth Lord, basic Labyrinth Lord, not advanced. And I told them, I'm like, I'm going to have you use a generator. We're going to use 5 generators or 5. You're going to generate 5 additional characters and just print them off. And these will be on the side. But I want this to be a reminder that like, don't get super attached, because you can die very easily. In fact, one of the players, she has, I think, 1 or 2 HP. I want to say it's 1, might be 2. There is very real threat. Once we start, I am running this the way I run OSR, and I'm very upfront. And I tell them, if you die, I won't feel bad. You got to learn. That's how it is. And they enjoy it and they have fun. And talking to them after, they were like, that was some of the most fun I've ever had. I've never stayed in a room as long, exploring every nook and cranny, checking every trap. There was one scene with like a fountain that was really creepy. Like, I thought it was fun. We spent 20 minutes trying to figure out if that fountain had anything. And just like you said, being upfront with that deadliness and kind of that, instilling that intrigue that comes with OSR, I think is very important, because if you're not upfront with it, someone can have a bad time. Some people can, oh man, I put this much backstory and now that character is dead. So I think kind of being upfront with that deadly aspect, and kind of being open with what's expected of the session is not only important in any D&D session, be it Dungeons and Dragons or even Pathfinder or any other system, but especially OSR. If they're coming from a newer system, just remind them of that, and you'll have a good time. Set those expectations and realities right up front. Yeah,
I always say losing is fun, and that's something you have to incorporate into your playing. Because I've had players who have one of my players at work. He lost at least 2 characters every time we played, and he was coming from a BRP background. But of course, BRP is also even more violent. But he was still like. He loved to get into the thick of things, which we all loved. He created so much drama, but he was losing characters like crazy. And in the end, he was like, "This is not for me." And I was like, "But I'm sorry, because the others love your antics. They love it, but of course, you're dying all the time, and you're always level 1. You get a new character; it's always level 1. And I'm sorry, but you got to be a little more careful. But it's not his play style, so he couldn't get past that, but the others could. The thing what I love about it is that in a game where you can die so easily is that you get really attached to people who go up in level. I had a player who had a level 6 magic user, which is really
insane.
That's a big deal.
That's high.
That's high. And they found a bunch of potions, and they figured, okay, the first thing we do this session is going to find out what those potions do. I asked them, how are you going to do it? We sipped them, of course. I was like, okay, because one of them was poisonous. So they sip it, and of course, I randomize who gets what, because the potions in old D&D are never typical. Yeah. Every potion maker makes them different, so you can't say a brown one's always this one, or this smells bad, or something like that. It's not like that. So they drank it, and of course, he drank the poison. And then, okay, save. I didn't make the save.
Dead.
You're dead, man. It was poison. What? He was dead. Yeah. And I swear he was going to cry.
Yeah.
I mean, the tears were welling up inside because he was a 14-year-old magic user who was like, in my game, magic users are always chaotic, like Lamentations. You dabble with magic, you're not stable person. So he's a chaotic, but still, 14-year-old magic user was like one of the most senior in the group, like so powerful at this point, and then she dies straight up, and then he had to walk out and come back. I'm gonna roll up a new character, and in a fit of rage, he called it Ass Face. He was so pissed, and then Ass Face got far, so everyone's loving Ass Face. Oh, the Ass Face is a great character. I mean, he rolled really good stats. He was going up in levels. And immediately afterwards, they think, "Oh, can we res characters in this game?" Yeah, there is a death cult in the town, which was part of the adventure. The whole town is ruled by a death cult, which all the players were trying to interact with all the time.
Resurrection in old school is
15,000. We
so
can do
expensive.
Her name was Annabelle. We randomized all the NPCs who become player characters later. So Annabelle. Was she a member of the church? Yes, she was. Okay, we need a donation. Okay, how much? 15,000 gold. That's as much as gold as they had gotten up to that point. So it was like, oh no, this is not going to work. So they gave the body to the church to be entombed, because he was a part of the church now. And the same adventure, the same day, they found a fountain of gold, found the carrion crawler, which is a huge maggot. Turned that into gold, hacked it, and they carried out, over, I think, 60,000 gold. That session. So they were like, oh, and they resurrected her, and she came back, and he was so happy. Annabelle's back. And I told them, I did it. Yeah, I told them also, like, when she got rezzed, someone else's, like, is behind those eyes now. It's not the same person. And then all the players start screaming, "Oh, it's so Game of Thrones!" Oh, they were just loving it. And she was changed. Like, she's not the same Annabelle. Right. And then he started role-playing her differently, and that she was really macabre and all that kind of stuff. And she was like, and of course, later on, that same character unknowingly swore faith servitude to a vampire. So all that kind of stuff happens, but that happens because a character you're invested in, and all that's the danger of the game creates that kind of attachment. So first level characters are a dime a dozen, but as soon as you get that third or fourth level character, you get really, really scared, and you start really getting nervous. The more you play, you get, oh god damn, I need to go back into the dungeons now. Damn,
So
I'm gonna lose my character.
yeah, and so we mentioned a few times that OSR is a scene, right? And with every scene, there are people in said scene, because otherwise there wouldn't be a scene. And some of these people you might want to avoid, or there's a reputation about the OSR scene that is for a more conservative bent of person. That is completely not true. There are 3 people on here that are not conservatives who love these games, but it is notorious amongst the role-playing game public as large because of these controversies, like the red, yellow, green list that happened a couple weeks ago. That was like the most bullshit I've seen in a long time, and we had a whole 4 years of bullshit recently. So like, so I kind of want you guys to like let me know more about this, because there's something to talk about, something to how to kind of navigate this as a scene, as it were.
Yeah, Gabe, do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I'll start. I really had to collect my thoughts on this this week, because I mean, obviously, like, everyone has their opinion on the red, green, yellow list and everything, and I think I want to start by saying it's dangerous in a couple of ways, and I think that it's dangerous in the sense that something like that could potentially like fractalize and give people a lot of a negative outlook on a scene that maybe they're interested in, because I think that OSR in general caters to a lot of people. It's not necessarily, OSR doesn't have to come associated with a political ideology. And I don't think communities in general should ever come that way. If someone's into, hey, I'm really into playing this video game, it shouldn't have that attachment of a political ideology. And I think that that specific list had someone's, political beliefs and how they prefer to have their games, like apolitical, which is, I think, what they were claiming the list was made for. But I think that the dangerous aspect comes from people having these, being told that OSR is conservative leaning or, Republican leaning, however you want to describe it. And then seeing something like that, the dangerous aspect is that there were people, and I think Malcolm and I talked about this a little bit in private. There were people that were listed as green, which were not actually associated with any specific political thing. I know the author through Old Tan's Door, which is something I'm running my players. He was listed as green, and he flat out came out and was like, "No, do not associate me with this." And he made out a tweet that said trans men are men and trans women are women, Black Lives Matter, and all of that. So I think that the dangerous aspect could be that someone is listed on that when in fact they have no business on it, because I know Greg Gillespie, who's author of The Barrow Maze and a few other things. I personally interacted with that guy. I talked to him because one of my books had an issue with it. Amazing, cool dude. But I saw in a Twitter reply, people were like, he's dead. Let's cancel him and stuff like that. And that only creates even more divisiveness in the community. So whichever political standpoint you want to take on it, whether you want to be as aggressive as let's cancel everyone on this list, or whether you want to try to find a game that maybe isn't as politically heated, that kind of divisiveness is just something I don't want to see, period. I don't want to see people that are going to be kind of tossed aside because they appear in someone's, this is true OSR versus not. That's my take on it. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to get into any specific scene, whether it is a role-playing game role-playing scene like OSR, you need to find out who you want to associate your table with, and you need to figure out if this game is appropriate or not for your table. If you don't want to play something associated with Zach S., who had his own political experience, we'll say, some things came out that weren't very savory. If you want to ban his books, that's totally fine too. But you don't need to immediately like start listing everybody like it's some type of ranking approval system. But that is my personal take on it. I've probably gone on more than I should have about it. But Malcolm, what do you think? Do you agree? Disagree?
Well, yeah, I think that my take is that the OSR is like any scene. It has, I mean, those of us who've been in music scenes know all about it. There's a lot of big characters who take a lot of stock in what they think, and which in some way it's laudable. I mean, if you're a creator, I want you to have a very strong opinion about what you think is good, because that will help you create good stuff. And if that means a little trash talking, so be it. As me as a consumer, I mean, pompous people can create good stuff. So I want people to have a strong opinion about things and such. That's how it basically any scene is. But also the OSR is strangely a microcosm of the entire, let's say, America. So because it's also a small nostalgia factor, it means that it spans a huge age range.
Yeah.
So you have people that are kids up to 70-year-olds playing. So, and being in America, that means that if you're a little bit older, you might skew Republican, and that might mean things. And that is basically how it is. So I think people from more insular communities, and the punk community, as big as it is quite insular. I mean, it's hard to be a right winger and listen to punk because you're not going to be accepted. But I mean, if you were like, I don't know, into mandolin playing or drums or something like that, of course, anybody can be a drummer. And strangely, the same thing is with old school D&D. So you get people who have different political views, and people are not used to that, because I'm used to being in the story in narrative control scene, and there's much more homogenous scene there, where people who like the same things, have maybe the same cultural backgrounds. But D&D is so big and so old, you get a lot of people into it. So I think what people think is having a right-wing bias just means, sadly, it has a plethora of different people, and they're not used to meeting Republicans in their scenes. And sadly, Republicanism in America has become something quite toxic in the mainstream. I mean, talking about the big lie, about the election, COVID denialism, about a bunch of heinous stuff. And I mean, I don't like pro-lifers or necessarily, but I mean, and I think that government should be big and all that stuff. But there are issues people can differ on. But now Republicans have become toxic in of themselves, and that creates some tension when there are Republicans in your midst and they say a bunch of stupid shit and ignorant stuff. And what I think is important is that you create a scene that is open to everyone. And I don't mean open to Republicans necessarily, but open to people from differing backgrounds, different ethnicities, different persuasions, but all that kind of stuff. I mean, being open to, so people from oftentimes minorities can feel welcome in our scene. So that's the things that are not negotiable. You cannot have someone question someone's pronouns if it's important to them. That's not okay. You can't have people slack off on Black Lives Matters issues in a disrespectful manner. People can think differently, all that, but that when you have African American players at the table, I mean, there's some things that you have to be respectful for everyone who's there, and then you can differ, and maybe some places have to become a little apolitical, because it gets in America very tough very quickly, and everyone who has a large family in the States probably recognizes this, that some things you can't talk about around the larger family gatherings anymore. And that might be the same thing here. But I think the important thing is to work for diversity, to open up your own table. Don't play with only people you know from high school. start reaching out and meeting people from totally different backgrounds, and trying to invite them to your games. Create gaming clubs, and just make sure that this is how we interact here, and make sure that there's not only white middle class males that are coming there, or cis males, but other kinds of people, and reach out, say we're trying to make a community here that will be open to all types, and we will enforce this, everyone's being treated with respect. Those are things that you have to work for. But then I think, sadly, that at least in America, but also here in Sweden, that searches for like. I mean, and the big sort is starting to come. And when you don't meet people of other backgrounds, you can start demonizing them and making them the other. And I think that's what Republicans are doing right now, that they don't meet enough Democrats or left-leaning people, and they start thinking that they want them. They think the Democrats actually want to destroy America and to enslave them and their children and all this weird stuff. And if they met more Democrats and had lived with them and had to meet them at PTA meetings and stuff, you might not like them, and you might talk shit about them behind their backs, but you wouldn't think they were trying to destroy the country. So I think, I
think that's just kind of a look on American politics right now, is that a lot of people's biggest fault is just echo chambers. And I think that that's unhealthy for both sides. Personally, I'm very left leaning, but I think that sitting and listening to the same echo chamber over and over and over and over and over isn't healthy. And that's how you get things like, again, those Twitter comments that like genuinely upset me, because I own a lot of books from some of those authors, and they had to come out and basically say like, hey, this is where I stand, because people were just ready to just immediately cancel them. And that's scary, and that's very dangerous in my opinion.
The thing about that list. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, there's kind of a hair trigger thing going on right now, because like, even if the point, I sort of think the point of some of this was just to kind of try and like throw a grenade out there and like really have it explode. And it did. It have exploded. A lot of people got hit and had to talk about their feelings on things that they didn't really necessarily have to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't require people to tell me their political philosophy when they show me their game. I might deduce it from the way the game is written, but like, that's from, whatever taste. But I think that there is this involves humans. There's a percentage of humans that are toxic. Okay. There are toxic humans everywhere. And on both sides of every political argument, any scale, you're going to find people that are terrible in one way or another. Zach S being the edgelord of, there's the sexual predators in a lot of places. And we have to continue to fight and create spaces that allow people to come and hang out and enjoy these games that we enjoy without allowing these toxic personalities to rule the day. And that's one of the reasons I said OSR should be the first of this series, because I originally, when I first started listening to Fullmetalrpg, I was very much in the narrative control sector of story games and all that. And it was through listening to a lot of these shows that I kind of discovered a lot of the OSR stuff. And while fantasy is not my primary genre, I do enjoy playing it with my friends, and I enjoy having these experiences where, just like in narrative control, where everything's on just the end of a string, and it just one ways, and it's all down the hill. And that's and that's really what I think has to be said about any scene. But we have to continue to be in the scene, even if we think that there's a lot of toxic stuff, if we want to move forward and still enjoy things, right?
Yeah, but I also agree Richie. The thing I think is important is also not to oversell it. I mean, we do have a few actors who are flat out conservatives and espouse a lot of conservative views on politics, and also judge other players and other types of gamers because of that. I mean, they exist, of course, but I don't think they're necessarily that political in their content. So I don't think even buying their book would make. Oh, it's not like you're getting pro-life propaganda. There's nothing. All their political leanings are only in social media. So, but I don't think that
there was definitely some of those. There was definitely some stuff we saw from one of those people on that list this last week. That was a random dungeon generator about abortion.
There
are definitely people on those lists that are definitely trying to claim a space for a very specific ideology that's happening all the time. I'm not going to mention that person's name because we don't need that, right? But
no, exactly.
Just know that not everybody on that list or in the scene is out for a good time. They're here to kind of portray their own thing. So, but anyway, we're at an hour and a half here. So I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and give me your final thoughts, anything we missed, anything you want to mention, final statements, and then I got a little thing and then we'll end the show. So
sure.
Sorry.
Sorry. Well, I'll start. I would like to pitch or recommend the podcast Blogs on Tape, which is a podcast where different people read up like the best blog texts in the OSR. So you can you don't have to read them, you can just listen to them. So you just subscribe to their feed and you'll get, I mean, a lot of really good stuff from the best in the scene, and a lot of them are really eye-opening, really interesting, and they're also quite funny because many of them write their texts in a very in a very casual manner, so it actually works as someone reading them aloud. So I would highly recommend that blog. You get a lot of stuff there, and if you're interested in the OSR, I think the blog still is probably one of the best places to go. There's a lot of creativity out there, a lot of really smart people writing. I mean, generation best in the generation stuff actually. So if you don't want to read the blogs, there's a podcast where people just read the posts, and it's great.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
I think with OSR, I always recommend everybody to at least try it. Whether someone's been playing 5e nonstop, whether someone exclusively plays OSR or anything. And I think that just give it a shot. There's a lot of different systems that can cater it to you. I always describe OSR like Linux. There's a Linux for everything. There's an OSR retro clone for literally everything. I would say that if you are interested, and you're kind of like, I want to see how this old school feels, but you don't want to try full old school, something like Morkborg would be great. But if you do want to go full head on into OSR, Old School Essentials is popping off and it's pretty big. But you can go as far back as something like Labyrinth Lord, which is my personal favorite. And just give it a shot, because I think that it's such a different mindset in how the game is played and how the game is run, that I think that bare minimum, you will come out with something new to throw into either your game, your play style, or something, because it's so. Some people say, "Oh, it's hyper deadly. It's super dangerous," and all that. That is some of OSR, but I don't think it's like the definition of it. It's an attractive quality for someone like me, but I think that the thing that I like the most about it is that the power, like the scale of power, is so reeled back to where you really have to think about every single action you do, which adds so much to the game. And I think that in modern D&D, some of that can be lost because the power scaling is so high up or whichever, that I think just giving it a shot. You don't like it, that's fine too, but at least you tried it. And if you do get into it, there's so many resources for you to come up with your own adventures or for free adventures or whichever. And I mean, I have a friend that's really into art that just likes OSR because of all the artwork and the layout and the passion that goes into each product. So there's something for everybody in there. And you shouldn't look at certain things that might seem unsavory to you as a thing to prevent you from trying it, because if you want to try it, there will be a space for you at someone's table to try OSR. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Like I wanted to wrap it up here, mention that it was an amazing conversation. I'm glad we had this. And I also re-mention that, you think you're following us on Instagram, you're not. But also, I'm trying to get there. But also, if you want to see, of course it doesn't work because anyway, the new T-shirt, the new limited edition, new logo, amazing Wolfmungus art on the front. I have a picture of me wearing it, so it does exist. It is. I wish I had gotten it washed by now so I could wear it today, but I'm wearing the old school logo T-shirt that you missed because it's gone. But it's gone. But definitely go to our TeePublic site through our link tree, fullmetalrpg.com, to check out that art because I love it. And there's a cheeky little ampersand in there somewhere. If you want to look around in the art, there's something very cheeky in there. So I really appreciate everybody's coming and watching and did it not there we go. It transitioned back to us. And I wanted to say have a good night. Have a good lovely day as I transition over to the outro. Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Later.
Right.